Hello, I'm Kelly Dennis. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I work with people who struggle with eating disorders and disordered eating, anxiety and depression, and I do some couples counseling as well. And I found in my work with people that most people have difficulty managing stress. And so I've created this YouTube channel to help people to be able to learn some tools and techniques to be able to manage their stress more effectively and regulate their emotions better. And so if you've been following along, you know that I've been talking about mindfulness and relaxation and cognitive behavioral therapy. And so today's video is going to be a little bit about mindfulness, and then it's also going to touch a little bit on inner child work. I have some clients currently who are working on some inner child stuff, and I thought that I might be able to combine some things into a video to be able to be helpful with that. So one of the things I've noticed is that most children are very good at being mindful, unless they struggle with some sort of focus problem or attention deficit problem, or have some other mental or intellectual disability that keeps them from being able to practice that. But most of them are very good at being mindful. And I remember when my kids were growing up, one of the things that they really enjoyed was having stories read to them. And so I was thinking the other day about attention and mindfulness and focus and concentration. And I know that one of the things that happens when we read to children is that most of the time they're really riveted to what is happening. Some of that is because it's very calming and soothing, the rhythm of our voice as we're reading aloud. And then also there's typically pictures in storybooks for young children, and so they can really focus on that as well. So there's a little bit of early visualization going on. And then also, of course, nurturance and proximity. They're typically sitting on our laps or sitting next to us, and there's some sort of connection there. And so I thought what I'd do today is I would take you through a mindfulness exercise of reading a book aloud to you, and you can practice being mindful. And then I also wanted to touch on some inner child work, because one of the ways that our inner child can be soothed and activated and then soothed is by reading childhood stories, things that were read to us as children, that we remember fondly and we connected with, or things that can bring up some emotion. So I've decided that I would read to you The Polar Express. So this is a book that typically activates my inner child, and so I'll probably be able to practice some self-soothing of that inner child as well as we read. So get yourself in a comfortable position and snuggle up to somebody, or take care of yourself. Give yourself some self-compassion, putting your hand on your chest or giving yourself a little cuddle as we read this book. It is The Polar Express. I'm just going to shift my camera here so that you can see the pictures. On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound a friend had told me that I would never hear, the ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. There's no Santa, my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night, I did hear a sound, though not of ringing bells. From outside came the sounds of hissing steam and squeaking metal. I looked through my window and I saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. It was wrapped in an apron of steam. Snowflakes fell silently around it. A conductor stood in the open door of one of the cars. He took a large pocket watch from his vest, and then he looked up at my window. I put on my slippers and robe, and I tiptoed downstairs and out of the door. "All aboard!" he cried out. I ran up to him. "Well," he said, "are you coming?" "Where?" I said. "Why, the North Pole, of course," he answered. "This is the Polar Express." I took his outstretched hand. and he pulled me aboard. The train was filled with other children, all in their pajamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols and we ate candies with nougat centers as white as snow. We drank hot cocoa as thick and as rich as melted chocolate bars. Outside, the lights of towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced forward. Soon, there were no more lights to be seen. We traveled through cold, dark forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from the train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness. We climbed mountains so high it seemed as if we would scrape the moon. But the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. The mountains turned into hills, the hills to snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the great polar ice cap. Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner on a frozen sea. "There," said the conductor, "is the North Pole." The North Pole. It was a huge city standing alone at the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas toy was made. At first, we saw no elves. "They're gathering in the center of the city," the conductor told us. "That is where Santa will give out the first gift of Christmas." "Who receives the first gift?" we all asked. The conductor answered, "He will choose one of you." "Look," shouted one of the children, "the elves!" Outside, we saw hundreds of elves. As our train drew closer to the center of the North Pole, we slowed to a crawl. So crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers. When the Polar Express could go no further, we stopped, and the conductor led us outside. We pressed through the crowd of the large open circle. In front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and they pawed, ringing the silver sleigh bells that hung from their harnesses. It was a magical sound, like nothing I'd ever heard. Across the circle, the elves moved apart, and Santa Claus appeared. The elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us, and pointing to me, he said, "Let's have this fellow here." He pulled me up into the sleigh. The conductor handed me up. I sat on Santa's knee, and he asked, "Now what would you like for Christmas?" I knew that I could have any gift I could imagine, but the thing I wanted most for Christmas was not inside Santa's bag. What I wanted more than anything was one silver bell from Santa's sleigh. When I asked, Santa smiled. Then he gave me a hug and told an elf to cut a bell from the reindeer's harness. The elf tossed it up to Santa. He stood holding the bell high above him and called out, "The first gift of Christmas." A clock struck midnight. As the elves roared their approval, Santa handed the bell to me, and I put it in my bathrobe pocket. The conductor helped me down from the sleigh. Santa shouted out reindeers' names and cracked his whip. His team charged forward and climbed into the air. Santa circled above us, then disappeared into the cold, dark polar sky. As soon as we were back inside the Polar Express, the other children asked to see the bell. I reached into my pocket, but the only thing I felt was a hole. I had lost the silver bell from Santa Claus's sleigh. "Let's hurry outside and look for it," one of the children said. But the train gave a sudden lurch, and we were moving. We were already on our way home. It broke my heart to lose the bell. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children. I stood at the doorway and waved goodbye. The conductor said something from the moving train, but I couldn't hear him. "What?" I yelled out. He cupped his hands around his mouth and he said, "Merry Christmas." The Polar Express let out a loud blast from the whistle and sped away. On Christmas morning, my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents. When it looked as if everything had been unwrapped, Sarah found one last small box under the tree. It had my name on it. Inside was the silver bell. There was a note. "Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket. Signed, Mr. C." I shook the bell. It made the most beautiful sound my sister and I had ever heard. But my mother said, "Oh, well, that's too bad." "Yes," my father said, "it's broken." When I'd shaken the bell, my parents hadn't heard a sound. At one time, most of my friends could hear the bell, but as years passed, it fell silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear its sweet sound. Though I've grown old, the bell still rings for me as it does for all who truly believe. So that's a book that activates my inner child. And so in order to soothe her, I say that it's okay that she feels excited about the wonder and the excitement of Christmas. She was often told that it was silly to be excited, that it wasn't very practical to believe in Santa Claus. And so when I'm soothing her, I can say it's okay to want to believe in that wonder and excitement of life, that innocence of time when things were simple. So I hope you enjoyed reading this book with me. And if it activated your inner child, go ahead and do some self-soothing, identify the emotions, and just allow yourself to have them. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.